Hello, hello, hello. This is Misty Magdalena Grace with the new and improved version of Healthy and Wealthy and Wise, where we talk about spirituality, psychedelics, plant medicine, microdosing, and really that journey within to finding your best innate wisdom, to your best health, your best wealth through all sorts of inner child healing, trauma release, grief recovery, overcoming addictions, and working with the mind, the body, and spirit. So go ahead, leave a review, subscribe, download. We look forward to your feedback. Thanks for tuning in today. Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to another live episode of Healthy and Wealthy and Wise. Again, I am Misty Magdalena Grace. I call myself Magdalena for short. To keep things simple. And this month has been Women's Empowerment Month. And we've had some really powerful, profound, new, and in some cases, people might say controversial topics. And I'm following up our show on Friday where we talked about the origin story of the original woman, Lilith, and the dark feminine and all this new feminine frequency, energy. So what better topic to follow that than talking about rediscovering your sexy mojo with my friend Michelle Dexter, who's here with me in Southern California. Welcome, Michelle. So good to see you.
Oh, thank you. It's so good to be here.
Yeah. So if you guys are tuning in live or replay, hashtag live, hashtag replay, if you find value in this show today, I always say sharing is caring. Please hit the share button. And we have so much to talk about. So I just want to dive in and introduce you. So Michelle and I met actually through networking here in San Diego through CIHS, California for the Institute for Health Sciences. And right away, when I heard what she did, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to know this woman. And we've become friends. And I'm just so grateful that you're even like a neighbor and like a sister to me now, because your story and mine have some similar threads. And just what you do to help people is just, I'm in awe. So if you guys don't know Michelle, she's an integrative psychologist, a sexologist, a former fundamentalist Christian, author of Change Your Money Consciousness, Change Your Life. So Michelle, I can't wait for you to share your story because we got some powerful stuff to talk about today.
We do. Thank you again for having me. Yeah. So as you mentioned in my introduction, that I am a former fundamentalist Christian, and that was very informative, in my journey. So when I was in college, given the religion, I got married. I was, engaged in my sophomore year, and then between my sophomore year and junior year, I had my wedding. And, as I was looking at the course catalog for what classes to take, in the beginning of my junior year, I saw the Human Sexuality class. And I thought, oh, that could be really interesting. I'm newly married. Maybe my husband and I should take that together. And I mentioned that to him over dinner. And he said, absolutely not. That they'll teach us things that go against our fundamentalist principles. And I thought, well, okay. And I was kind of disappointed. So I just, put it out of my mind, and life moved on. And eventually we got a divorce. I was actually separated pretty shortly before I graduated my senior year. And I lived that last semester separated from him. And then I was able to get a legal divorce shortly after that. So to make a long story short, when I went to graduate school, I never really got to take those courses. And I became a professor. And I've been teaching now for 28 years. And in all that time, it took until about year 10 before I was even invited to teach a human sexuality class. And I thought, okay, this is my chance, for life making it up to me. So I had to go and do all the research and learn everything in order to be able to teach that class. And it was a lot of fun. It was very healing for me to be able to have the journey with my students to talk about these things so openly. And also at that point in my career, I had left the fundamentalist church. And so I was, much more open and ready to explore all kinds of fun and interesting things. And so I always told the class on the very first day, we're going to talk very openly and very frankly about human sexuality. So if you're offended by very frank and open talk, about penises and vaginas and body parts and even words like F-U-C-K, then we need to, have you just excuse yourself from this class, because we're going to have really, really raw and open conversations about you and your sex life and what's going on and the questions you have. And boy, did we, I had one young man who came up to me and he was, I think he was a freshman. I think he was 18. And He says, well, I've been having sex with this 36-year-old guy, and I'm wondering if that's okay. So that's the type of controversial stuff that we got into. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. I wish I could have taken that class.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we covered everything, from abortion to birth control to, safe sex practices to, sexual orientation and preference and everything in between.
And what were the age of the students that were in that class typically?
So at the undergraduate level, 18 to 22, and then at the graduate school level, when I actually got to teach human sexuality for graduate students, and then even create and design a course beyond that about healthy sexuality, which is really my passion in my academic life now. So graduate students are typically about 24 to 40.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I don't want to interrupt your story. I have some
Oh,
questions, but should I jump in right now?
yeah, go ahead.
Because I feel like, again, never had this conversation openly on my podcast before, and I can identify with your story, and that's what connected us. And I was so intrigued because I was, in religion until probably maybe around the same time as you. I don't know when you like officially left, but around my early 30s is when I said I can't do this anymore. A lot of sexual repression for myself, which ended up starting to hurt me in ways that I never knew. So I
Right.
feel like that might be a good starting point. And I know you have lots of tools in helping both men and women, right? Not just women. Would you say
Right.
you work with
Right.
both men and women?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, yeah, a lot of men come to me with erectile dysfunction, which not surprisingly, a lot of them have some type of religion wound in their past, and we have to address that. And men, I find this fascinating that masculine and feminine sexuality are often present in very different ways. So, for example, the way that men would have coped with their religious training that said it's not okay to have sexual expression would be that they would allow themselves to masturbate, even though they knew that they weren't supposed to, because they believed that as long as they allowed themselves to masturbate without having an orgasm at the end, that somehow that was okay. And I thought, oh, this is a very, very interesting strategy you've adopted here to kind of, mind trick yourself.
Wow. And what's the feminine version? Like what have you seen the most?
That it typically will show up with painful intercourse or anorgasmia, just having no orgasms at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And there's the religion wound. Let's just dive right
Yeah.
into that
Yeah.
and
Let's
how
just jump
how because we've both had our own journey with that, and I've talked openly about my story with addiction, with over emasculating myself, competing in a man's world, and I didn't realize that at the core part of that was the religion wound for a good portion of it. And
right.
so maybe if you want to describe how the religion wound manifests in your formation of your view of sex, and then we can talk into how do you heal that and work through that.
Right. So I would say globally that it's a denial of self and a denial of humanity. And then specifically about sexuality, it's denial of the sexual self and denial of sexual expression and denial of what it is to be a sexual being.
Wow.
Yeah. So, in my particular fundamentalist religion, they were really, really obsessed with purity and modesty. And they had a phrase that they would frequently use, purity or modesty in thought, word, and deed, meaning that you needed to keep pure thoughts. So, don't even engage in any type of sexual thought or sexual fantasy. And they said that if any of those thoughts pop into your head, immediately just distract yourself or consciously think of something else. And that in your words, that you wouldn't talk about it, and in your deed that you would dress modestly and you wouldn't participate in things that would even be remotely sexual. Like I remember one man giving a talk to a group, and he talked about how this was years ago. Demi Moore's Striptease movie had come out, and there was a big billboard on the freeway that he would pass by every day on his way to work. And as you recall, she's nude in that, but
Yeah.
provocatively posed. And so he said that every morning when he saw that it would stoke his desire. And so he had to just consciously turn his eyes away and consciously think of other things.
Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, self-denial and repression. And
Yeah.
anyway, because I can
Yeah.
say for myself, that's where a lot of times I would turn to alcohol because I was being denied in so many areas of my life, including sex. Full disclosure, and I'm open a book. I mean, my husband and I, we've struggled in that arena, both of us, because of religion wounds and other sexual traumas as well. So there's other layers to that. But through that process, I didn't realize how much society, culture, religion, especially, is all about abstinence and denying yourself pleasure. And then guess what? I think that's probably the root cause of most addictions, wouldn't you say? I don't know if what you think about that.
Well, addiction wound is usually showing up because it's something about my need isn't being met, and so now I'm going to do this maladaptive thing over here. Yeah, so that's in a nutshell.
Part of, yeah, which can also be if you're not finding your own pleasure in life and enjoying
Right.
life, you're living a lie and wearing a mask, and so that would make a lot of sense for sure.
It does make a lot of sense. Yeah.
So how does one, if anybody's listening here, recognizing like, oh my gosh, that's me. I've been denying myself my sexuality, my ability for pleasure. Is there any like symptoms outside of what we've already talked about, or any signs of like, oh my gosh, I think I need help?
Well, being an integrative psychologist, which is a fancy way of saying holistic or mind, body, spirit, it fascinates me how there's really no separation between the body, the mind, and the spirit or the soul. In fact, in psychology, there's a word that they mash together, body mind, one word,
Yeah.
because the mind really does manifest in the body and the body really does manifest in the mind. And so I find that when people have done a lot of suppressing of their sexual selves, that it comes out in a lot of different and unpleasant ways. Fibroid tumors, painful intercourse, vaginismus. That's another one that's usually correlated to religious wounding. Is vaginismus when the vaginal walls clamp so tightly closed that it doesn't allow for penetration. Yeah. Um, any type of female cancers are often, when we go back and we look at root causes, we often find that there's an origin somewhere in there. Now, Magdalena, I also want to say that for people who are not fundamentalist Christian, that in dominant American culture, there's also a lot of suppression. Historians estimate that there's about 1/3 of Americans have ancestry with the colonial people. So, the Puritans and that ilk. And the Puritans get a bad rap. They were a little more sexually liberal than we give them credit for, but they were very, very much into rules. And they were very, very much into the rule of you only have sex with your spouse. And so here we are, all these generations later, and culture is transmitted intergenerationally.
Yeah.
So there's all of that. Plus we throw in, all of the, because America, has a very wide and diverse, history, right? So we throw in all of the other, histories, and what we see is, oh yes, dominant American culture does have this theme woven through the thread of it about sexual repression, anti-pleasure, anti-sexual expression, except for, this box, whatever it is. Usually it's marriage and heterosexual stuff, but you get where I'm going. And so it seems to me that we have a deep cultural wound that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I would agree if I can add my own two
Yes,
cents, and it pairs beautifully with what we talked about on the last show is the whole concept of patriarchy, and that, thousands of years ago, there was this, I guess, movement, we'll call it, for lack of a better term, of the having religion be ruled, and there's a God and there's only a man, and then the woman is submissive and she must marry and bear children and again be monogamous, and all of those rules that were come down, and witches burned at the stake. I've talked about the witch wound, the religion wound. For me, they go hand in hand.
right.
And women just not being able to live out loud, and so that's a perfect segue, I guess, to is how is someone who maybe has, I know for me there's a lot of shame, guilt, uncertainty, and then you just kind of like hide,
Right.
and you don't want to be the bad person, or in my case, the bad girl. So I'm sure that impacted my mind, my body, mind, and I
Right.
know it did. But I'd love for you to share in your own words how you found the best way to help people and navigating through all that.
Right. Absolutely. Well, let me say a little bit about shame and guilt, and then I'll answer that question. So all emotions are data, and guilt and shame obviously are data too. Now, Guilt and shame, when used appropriately, is to have the sense of, oh, I have done something that is not healthy or healing or life affirming for me or for the people involved. Let me go ahead and course correct. That's the value of shame and guilt. What often happens, however, is that people will feel shame and guilt because of some arbitrary rule that has been imposed upon them by someone in authority or a perceived authority figure. And that is a misuse of shame and guilt. So, in my fundamentalist religion, where they, talked about, don't masturbate, and then lots of people did, and then got openly punished in the church for it.
Yeah.
I thought this is a real misuse of shame and guilt, because as far as I can tell, masturbation hurts no one unless you do it to the point where you physically hurt yourself. So don't do that. But yeah, but barring that, it seems to have all kinds of nice health benefits, and it teaches you about your body, which is a nice benefit for when you're in a sexual relationship. I can't tell you how many people I've had to give them homework about, you need to learn your body and you need to learn your recipe so you can share it with a partner.
Oh gosh, yeah, don't get me started on that. My husband wouldn't want me to talk too openly about our journey at this point, but I could so relate to that, because I was one of those people, and I some people don't like the word masturbation, like it's a trigger word, so I'm going to say self-pleasure
Sure.
even, right?
Let's go with
Um,
that.
learning how to pleasure yourself, and that can run the gamut of all sorts of things, right? Breath work and meditation,
Right.
and loving your body
Yeah.
in ways that, honestly, I think partners got to learn anyway, because what happens if your partner has had a lot of sexual trauma or does have a religion wound, and maybe you're just a few steps ahead of them? You got to have a way to have that orgasm, that outlet, that
Right.
it's kundalini energy, all of these things. It's love and money and sex are usually connected, right? And there's a lot
Right.
of
Yeah.
core
There's a
mindset. I know you
yeah,
talked about that probably in your book too, right?
I, I did. I did. Yeah. I know it seems kind of weird. Like, why would a sexologist write a book about money? Well, because they're intimately connected.
Yeah, and in a world where there's, kind of a financial economic crisis going on, maybe people, should just have more sex and more self-pleasure and figure that out and heal through that process. Granted, there's many wounds and layers to work through before you can probably even get there. So maybe that's a good segue to talking about how does one heal that through
Yes. Yeah. It is.
practical.
Way. Yeah. So when I wrote my book about money consciousness, I wrote about limiting beliefs, which is anything that you've decided, about money. But we can make the same limiting decisions about sex too. So it's not safe to have money. It's not safe to be sexual. I
Hmm.
don't have permission to have money. I don't have permission to be sexual. People will judge me negatively if I have too much money, or people will judge me negatively if I have too much sex.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we often have to look at our origin stories. There's a kind of a treasure trove of information in our childhoods and our early formative years, because that's where we develop what I call the love template or the sexual template. We also get a money template there too. Yeah. So when we're little children, we're observing the world. We're looking at the adults and we're looking at how they manage things, and we're looking at television and movies and the radio and all this media. And we're making decisions about, oh, this is the way that the world works. And of course, if we get punished for things, like the kid who's driven to school in a limousine, for example, and made fun of, because, what are you, Richie Rich? Or the opposite side, the kids who's driven to school in what my grandma called a jalopy. Um, or the kid who is shamed for having natural exploration of their body. The parents, will spank the child, for simply wanting to understand, and explore their bodies. Or the child who is, shamed for wanting to know a certain word. All of
Mm.
those things, that they form the sex template, the love template, and the money template. And so we have to go back and we have to really understand, what's going on here? And then we have to unpack it and figure out what exactly we decided, and then we can uncreate it and we can replace that.
Mm. Beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. So that's basically, I do a lot of different things in my private practice. I'm trained in probably more than I can count modalities, and I have thousands of techniques that I use. So I really do like to tailor the work to every single person I work with. But for the purposes of this show, I really would like to talk about that process of what it is to discover that limiting belief and then to do an acupressure intervention in order to change it.
Wow.
Yeah. So the principles of acupressure and acupuncture have been around for 20,000 years. I'm thinking somebody by now would have noticed if it didn't work.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing because usually you hear like, I don't know, 3,000, 4,000.
Well, acupuncture as a practice has been around for 3,000 years, but the principles were discovered 20,000 years ago. When we're reading ancient Chinese text, it's all in there. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, and we don't learn that growing up.
No, we don't, particularly in the West.
Yeah.
There can be a lot of xenophobia about it. I mean, like I said, I was, well into adulthood before I was even, open to acupressure and acupuncture. Yeah. So yeah, and in fact, I always thought, I don't want to use needles. That sounds like it hurts. But then I found myself at the traditional Chinese medicine conference that the Pacific College of Oriental Medicine, I think they've changed their name now though. Anyway, the local acupuncture school was having their annual conference, and I was there with a friend and learning all about it. And I had some pain going on, and so one of the acupuncturists there was kind enough to have me lay on a mat and stick some needles in me. And I thought, oh, that wasn't so bad. It just kind of felt like a prick of a needle, and then okay, and it probably at about, a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst, I was probably about an 8 level of pain. She came back after half an hour and I was down to a 3. And I just thought, this is incredible. What was this? This is amazing. So I've been a fan ever since.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, being raised in my, fundamentalist church, of course, they taught that, again, no sexual fantasies, no sexual expression outside of marriage, no masturbation or self-pleasuring, all of that. And so as I was leaving the church, it took me a little while, but, I had to confront, all of those thoughts, that were, bubbling up for me. And at the time I had a boyfriend who called himself a fringe church member that, which really wasn't allowed. You were either all in or you were out.
Yeah.
So he was very fundamental for me in kind of exploring ideas with me about, how would this particular sexual practice be hurtful and when would it not? And kind of like deconstructing all of that. So one night we had a very long conversation about self-pleasure, and we talked about the doctrine of the church, that said just no. And the more we dissected it, the more it became apparent to me, like I've already said, that hurts no one unless you hurt your body because you did it too much. And that was kind of a shift in my own psyche about like, well, okay, so if that's not true, then what else isn't true? And it really opened up my mind, to really kind of explore all of those things. Now, like I said, that man was my boyfriend. And so that, because he was on the fringe and I was leaving, we did explore a little bit. And then, all this stuff would come up about like, and I'd notice these beliefs bubbling up like, oh, it's sinful to be sexual like this. And I was like, okay, and if it's sinful, that means I'm bad. And now I've lost God's favor. Oh, okay, there's the belief. I've lost God's favor by being sexual. There's one. Here's another. That you mentioned bad girl. Well, now I'm a bad woman.
Yeah.
And I'm a disobedient woman. And I'm a disrespectful woman because I've disrespected God and all of the authorities that he put in place in his church. Yeah.
A lot of judgment.
Yeah, a lot of judgment. Yeah. So that was the first process of kind of understanding, being able to articulate those beliefs. So we'll call that step 1, articulating the beliefs. Now, step 2 is to notice, where are you holding that in your body? And your body, if you allow it, if you get quiet, it will show you. And a lot of people, of course, are holding those things in their sexual organs. So, if you're feeling it in your root chakra, your vagina, someplace like that, then okay, that's data. This is good. So once you've kind of got that sensation, some people tell me it feels just like pressure or pain. Some people say it just feels like a tingling sensation, or some people just say it just kind of like a feeling of like, pay attention here. That they can't articulate anything more than just pay attention here. And that's okay. That's good enough. So we'll call that step 2. And then step 3 is using acupressure in order to be able to resolve that. Now, here's one of the techniques that I use. And this one is I'm using 5 acupressure points on the forehead. Now, you don't have to memorize these. I'm just showing these for illustration purposes. Okay, so right here between the eyebrows and the hairline, right between in the middle, those are the emotional release points. And so when there is an excess of emotion, like in these cases, we were talking about, say, shame and guilt and how that can literally get stuck in the body mind. These are great buttons,
Ooh.
buttons, invisible buttons to massage or just to press on to let that go.
That's beautiful.
Now,
I want to make something aware for those who are listening on audio only and iTunes later, go to my YouTube channel, subscribe, and so you can come and see this. I'll also have it in the show notes too, but carry on.
yes. Okay, now if we go up to the hairline, so middle of the eyes all the way to the hairline, okay, now we're holding left brain and right brain acupressure points. So of course, all those thoughts that we've been thinking about it, this is a great place to release that. Yeah, so, like I mentioned, the thoughts about I'm a bad girl or I've disrespected God's authorities, because he called them to run his church, all of that. This is the place to let that go. Okay, now, if you follow the midline from the middle of your nose all the way up to your hairline, that one right there is your amygdala point. And your amygdala is your threat detector. It's always scanning the environment. And the minute it sees a threat, it goes, red alert, red alert, red alert, threat, 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 threat. Yeah. And it signals the body, we got to fight, flight, or freeze. So of course, when you're having thoughts like, I've disrespected God, of course that activates fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah, because you think you're going to hell.
Right, exactly. And, thinking about eternal damnation and being, roasted on a spit slowly so that you burned,
Yeah.
And poked with fire pokers. I mean, it doesn't sound very good.
Or burned at the stake,
Yeah,
different
stuff
things.
like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and all your friends go to heaven, and so you're alone down in hell. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So here's a shortcut. Simply place your hand across your forehead, and now you've covered all 5 points.
Wow. So
Easy peasy.
literally, I just want to process this out loud if I may. So if I'm feeling a fear or limiting belief, and then I'm noticing it, especially in my body, and I do have a question on that, just come here. How long do I hold it?
Until it feels done, So most people can process a limiting belief in 3 minutes. It's very, very rare that I've seen somebody need to hold their forehead for more than 3 minutes. And the idea is that you're noticing where you feel it in your body. You're simply breathing in and out normally. You're not doing anything funny or special with your breath. You're just sitting there and just noticing your breath going in and out while you focus on that body part and focusing on that belief. And the idea is that it will begin to shift. So here are some conclusions that I shifted to when I did that work. We're all children of this universe, or we're all children of God. And it isn't fair that somebody should have more authority over me and my relationship with God or source just because they're the leader of a church. I can have a direct relationship with God or source. And because I'm a child of this universe, I can get direct inspiration about what is okay for me and what is safe for me. And also that I take ownership of this body and I can decide what to do with it. Now, if we're talking to the consciousness of the bodies, what bodies have to say, bodies want to be treated nicely. So don't do sexual things that hurt. But beyond that, if it feels like you're in a situation with somebody who makes you feel safe and there's a loving intention there, go for it.
Yeah, I love it. You're reminding me of something, and this is why we call our sanctuary the Lotus Throne Sanctuary. You're sitting on that throne of your reclaiming your personal sovereignty, and I'm
Right.
you can't maybe see if you're listening on audio only. I'm clutching my solar plexus right now, and just really that's for me where I had to call my power back because I felt so powerless, worthless, bad girl, all of the syndrome, all of the things, limiting beliefs. So I, chose to go down a very dark path of self-sabotage, addictive behaviors, and all that kind of stuff. So my question to you with all of that, and I hope I'm not like interrupting. I know you have your step process. Can I ask a question really quick?
This is the perfect time.
Okay. Because a lot of people, and I'm pointing at myself, and I've also talked to a lot of people, it was hard to feel my body I was so cut off from my body because I'd chosen to numb myself with alcohol, social media, busyness,
Right.
avoidance, disassociation. And so until I started doing psychosomatic therapy and working with psychedelics, for me, there was no way. I was so stuck in my head to actually feel anything going on in my body. Good luck with that. So do you have any advice for people who might be at that point?
Well, in my line of work, we often talk about dissociated parts. And those are parts of you that have basically lost track of you. So, it's parts of you, like, and I'm just gonna use myself an example, that if I disassociated a part, that it would feel just lost out in space. And if you could track it down and said, well, you're part of Michelle, it would say, Michelle who? Who, what, where? Yeah. Now, the reason why we do that is for safety and for protection. And usually one of the reasons why we engage in that is what we call cognitive dissonance. So dissonance meaning that two things don't match. And in this case, it's that your beliefs and your behaviors do not match. So what I found a lot in my practice is a lot of people would come in and they would say something like, well, I've got this religious belief about sex and sexuality, like it's only okay to have, sex in marriage, for example. But here I am, my behavior is that I'm having non-marital sex. Yeah. And so that's how they dissociate apart in order to cope and in order to, maintain some integrity in the psyche, because the psyche does not tolerate cognitive dissonance well. Yeah. And then, that's where we see those symptoms that we were talking about earlier manifest, with vaginal infections or vaginismus or, fibroids, tumors, those types of things.
Yeah, when you were saying female cancers, you're talking about more of like the sexual organs, not breast cancer, or is there a connection there too?
There's a connection there too. I mean, if we give the body a voice, breasts, have a lot to say about my function is nurturing, and my function is about receiving nurturing and giving nurturing, and also about some eroticism, because we've eroticized them in this country. So yes, female cancers can include breast cancer too. Yeah.
I didn't want to interrupt your tips, and I know we've got about 10 minutes left in the show, so I want to carry on now that I got my question answered.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So let's see, where was I? I think that
We were
really
feeling in the body, so we did limiting beliefs and then feeling in the body.
yes, yeah, the feeling in the body. Yeah, so there's something to be said about, okay, if I'm feeling disconnected from my body, where are my beliefs and my behaviors not matching? Let me explore that for myself. And it could be that it's showing up in ways that are not necessarily overtly sexual, but they're showing up in the creative center of the body. And like we talked about, money and sex, they both show up in the creative centers. So I read a case study once where a woman owned a restaurant and she was paying her employees under the table to avoid taxes. And then she was wondering why she was having a hard time moving ahead financially. And as her mentor pointed out, well, you're cheating. So you're attracting cheating energy. And look at this, that this is a cognitive dissonance for you. Yeah. So she put everybody on the books and started paying them, the way that she should. And wouldn't you know that a year later, her restaurant business had grown significantly.
Wow, 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 wow. That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. So also, we can call in dissociated parts. We can give them love. We can let them know, look, I love you. I want you. I need you. You're a part of me. It's safe to be a part of me. I promise to take really good care of you.
Yeah.
And giving it the message or whatever it needs, like, that it's okay to be sexual. So if this is a dissociated part, that feels like it's not okay to be sexual, about negotiating with it. I had a client recently who was talking to me about how she had this rule in her head that it was only okay for her to have sex with someone she loved. But here's the thing, is that she's in a life transition. She's trying to move, and she knows that, and because there's complicated situations, it's going to take probably a year or two before she can really be fully settled in her new place. And, so she's talking about like, well, I don't want to go a year or two without having an active sex life. And I said, yeah, that's, not really nice to do. I could understand that. And then she brought up this idea about, but I have to have somebody that I loved. And I said, you know what? How about if you find somebody with whom you can be loving, you don't have to necessarily have this mad toward affair, but somebody who can be loving in your life and you can be loving toward each other. And this person will know that you're making a transition. And when you leave, it's over and it's okay. And you would have thought that I like just hit her in the face because she just kind of like shook her head and was like, oh, I never thought of that. And I said, well, feel into it. Just feel into, just pretend you find somebody like this, you like each other as people, you're loving toward each other until you move and you're sexual. And she was like, I think I can do that. And
Oh yeah, you opened up the possibilities. I think
yeah,
because we've had so many constructs in society, religion, families of
yeah,
origin, even if you didn't, like you said, even if you didn't grow up in religion,
right.
ancestral trauma is one of our specialties. And I'll tell
Yes.
you, there's blood, there's something going on inside of you that is connected to that energy.
Oh,
So
absolutely. So yes, let's talk about ancestral trauma. That's another topic that I think is really, really important to look at because sometimes a lot of our stuff isn't even ours. We've inherited it from our ancestors. We know this through quantum physics, that the energy signature, can be transferred, from generation to generation. Now, my grandmothers, both of them were Victorians. And so they had some really crazy, ideas about sex and sexuality and bodies, you know. Yeah. Yeah. Like these weren't my grandmothers, but I've heard, from their peers, things like your husband should never know when you're menstruating. I'm like, I don't even know how you would hide that with a man you live with. I just don't know.
wow. Since this is Women's Empowerment Month, I have to ask, was there shame around menstruation?
Yes.
Got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Wow, 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 wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Denying your body's truth. I mean, it's a normal monthly, hopefully, again, there's many reasons for it not to be, but
Right.
to deny your truth of that is wow.
Right. Right. Yeah. And in my grandmother's case, they couldn't even use the word boyfriend or girlfriend or partner. So in family gatherings, when somebody would bring somebody in that role, they would simply introduce them as their friend.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and since it's relevant, I can share with you, I got to, with the help of working with my husband and regression work and plant medicine work, I got to the root cause of ancestral trauma around the old saying alcoholism runs in our family. And it actually went back to when the Christians were forcefully converting the pagan ancestors to, either you live or you die, or we hold it against you, boundaries and taking away their possessions and their land, and then you deny yourself, talking about self-denial of your truest essence.
Right.
It started with my ancestors, and so when I learned that, this kind of goes off, maybe I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent because I know I'll be wrapping it up shortly, but that self-denial, is what led me down a really, really dark path of not knowing myself, not knowing and living out loud all parts of my truest essence. And the more shame I just put on it, and the judgment and the demonization of alcohol and demonization of, not being a good girl, and all of these things that I know a lot. I'm speaking also because of Women's Empowerment Month. So women that are listening, really wanting to speak to you right now too, because a lot of times we don't know the origins of
Right.
these shameful feelings in our body, and so a lot of that, I feel, is, again, kind of summarizing where we started, goes back to the religion wound. So I'm hoping if some of you are listening out there right now and you've never even put two and two together, I just hope like you're getting this, like, because when that happened for me, I was like, and I don't know if this happened for you, but when I left the church in this body in this lifetime, I feel like that's when my ancestral trauma
Oh,
was ignited, and I can
right.
say that now because that's looking back, that's exactly when I started going slowly more and more and more and more away from my truest essence, started drinking more, started working more, starting people pleasing more, codependent behaviors of all kinds more, and just numbing out because I had given up my truest essence again ancestrally, but I was doing it again in this lifetime, just a little dressed up differently, but the origin story was back there. So I'll take a break here because I just said a lot. I don't know if you have anything to add with that, with what you've seen with your clients and the religion wound and sex.
Yeah. I would say that the religion wound and the ancestral wound and the sex wounds, they're often, very much, tangled up together, and it can be hard to disentangle them. And in fact, I don't even know that it's necessary to disentangle them, because a story is a story. The way that I like to work is to say, look, everything is a narrative. So let's hear it. Let's hear the narrative. Let's figure out where it is. Maybe it's 16 generations back. I've seen all kinds of interesting things even come out of prehistory. It goes that far back. Yeah, women who were raped, people who were in coercive sexual experiences, people who ended up in sex cults, just everything. I've seen it all. Oh, shame about being, gay or lesbian. Really, just anything you could think of. It's probably in someone's story someplace. And so again, we can talk to the innate of the body, and the body will tell us, what is going on. It will tell us the story, like I just mentioned mine, my grandmother's, stuff about, like, you don't dare, let anybody know that you have a period. And, all the shame and hypervigilance, about that, and how that, can show up, with painful menses and all of that.
Yeah.
And so then using a process to let it go. And like I said, most of my work comes down to acupressure, but I also do use some Ayurvedic work and some orthomolecular medicine to treat the root underlying biological causes of all these things too.
I love that. Yeah. And it's so connected back to the body, mind, spirit. If you don't address all of those areas, you might be missing out.
Right.
That's why, a lot of times we keep repeating behaviors or going from one addiction to
Right.
another. We're not getting to the root
Right.
underlying cause.
Right.
Well, I know this has been an amazing topic. Is there any last words that you feel like is on your heart that you haven't shared yet that you'd like to close out with?
Yes. If you find yourself denying the truth of who and what you are, look at that and find a safe way to explore that, so that you can really step into the full expression of you, whatever that is.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and that's part of our mantra here is we want to help people remember who they truly are. So that's a beautiful way of putting it. How can people find you? And do you have anything that you want to share, whether it's a free gift or anything from your resources that we can put in the show notes as well?
People can find me at my website, which is drmichelledexter.com, and no dot after Dexter, excuse me, no dot after doctor, it's just dr, michelledexter.com. And I own the Bamboo Garden Wellness Center, so please join us, for one of our events here in Encinitas, California. And I think that's it.
Yeah, and this is a great time. I'm going to share on April 21st. We're going
Yes,
to be,
how could I
my
forget?
husband and I, no, it's all good. And many of my viewers are all over the world. So if you are local or able to fly in or drive in on April 21st, my husband and I will be at the Bamboo Clinic and sharing, talking about Ghost Whisperer, connecting with your ancestors, connecting with your guides. Maybe you don't have past loved ones that you want to connect with. Maybe it's just going deeper within, knowing part of that. I say the kingdom of heaven lies within. I mean, okay, I'm paraphrasing Jesus, but that means you have that God spark, goddess spark within, and there's divine wisdom in there. Healthy and wealthy and wise wisdom is that innate wisdom within, and connecting with those guides. A lot of people aren't taught how to do that. We've been taught how to find God or whatever outside of ourselves, and anyway, that's all part of, I think, what we're wanting to shift in the consciousness right now as we head into the age of Aquarius. So April 21st, come and meet all of us in person if you guys are able to make that.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I've got one more question for you, and I'm going to have a word from our sponsor before we close out. So don't go away. Let me play this sponsored ad, and then I'll be right back.
Healthy and Wealthy and Wise is proudly sponsored by the Soul Vine, your number one go-to source for ayahuasca microdosing. This ayahuasca is legal. It is the Cappy vine. There is no DMT extract or molecule as a part of it, and it can and will transform your life from the inside out. Supporting the Shipibo tribe from South America, this is my go-to source for healing. Learn more at microdosingforhealth.com.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much again for being here. And I always ask this question to my guests, so I'll close and ask you the same. When you hear the phrase healthy and wealthy and wise, what does it mean for you?
It's a smile on my face. Yeah. That feels like the full embodiment of humanity.
Beautiful. Well, thank you again, guys. Exciting topic. I'd love your feedback. drmichelledexter.com. I'll put all of that in the show notes, and hopefully you guys can share this episode. If you know someone who especially has been struggling with this sexuality and desires and feeling shame, guilt, suffering, and needlessly, of course, because it's just not been taught to us at a very, very young age. And I know things are changing and tides are turning as we head into this more divine feminine era. So thank you for who you are and what you do. And until next time, guys, I just want to wish you your best health, your best wealth, and learning again how to continuously trust your best wisdom within. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Please subscribe, download, leave a 5-star rating or review, and also please refer this to a friend you know who may benefit from this inspirational message. We hope to see you again. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel or join my Facebook community. And if you are looking to manifest your best health, your best wealth by trusting your best wisdom within, please go to my website, www.microdosingforhealth.com. Again, www.microdosingforhealth.com. to quiet your mind, get into your heart, heal your body, and manifest your best health and your best